It's time once again for Evolve Sales Live. Welcome back. I'm Jonathan Fisher. When trying to improve sales results, much of the conversation revolves around marketing, the sales process, your core skills, and for good reason. But even if you have the very best sales engine on the planet, it could be argued that if you don't have top performers on your team, you'll still fall short. So, what is a top performer? Well, our guest today is an expert in the subject. Amy Hrehovcik brings a decade and a half of experience as a top-performing sales executive for such notable companies as ADP and Thomson Reuters and others. Today, she's the launch team captain for the sales training company Selling School, and she's personally known as a sales enablement pioneer, podcast host, corporate trainer, and a highly regarded thought leader. And we're excited to have her with us on the show today. Amy, welcome.
Thank you, Jonathan. It is a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Well, we've already had some conversations, you and I love the way you put things. You bring a lot of value to every conversation. Before we get into the topic for the day, which is what is a top performer, give us a sentence or two on what keeps you busy every day.
Well, we are in the process of a cohort right now with Selling School, so I'm got my hands dirty. I'm listening to calls. I'm coaching reps. I'm facilitating group coaching, and I'm designing training programs around like how to make sure that you are understanding the buyer. So really testing my own capacity on, both how many students I can help at any given time and how creative I can get with new types of content.
Good to hear. Well, and just a side note, we'll edit out for the podcast episode later, but my producer is telling me that you are all good on volume. So we are 5x5 and ready to rumble.
Awesome.
So, and a quick reminder, since I'm off on a sidebar to our audience, hey, we're here live. Don't forget, we want to have some Q&A with you live while we're together. So go ahead and start sending those questions via the chat. When we get to the bottom of this half hour, we're going to open it up, get some Q&A, get some Ask Me Anything time with our resident expert, Amy, at the end of the show. So, Amy, let me start off by asking you this question. What is a typical idea of a top performer out there as you see it? And, where's that miss the mark? What's wrong with that notion?
Yeah. Okay. So it's a great question. I was thinking about how you ended up phrasing like the subject for today. And I don't know if it's like what is a top performer, or here's maybe an adjacent framework. What's the difference between quota attainment and win rate? And specifically, like, what is the average win rate right now for tech sales? And that number is like it's pretty bad. It's like 17%. And so when you think about that, like, okay, what are we're actually, so even if somebody is hitting their quota, chances are, they're still winning way more time or way less times than they're losing. And so that was kind of the gist, I think, of the original conversation and how I think the room for improvement that we have on how we're defining top performance and also how we're measuring it.
Well, there's a lot of conversation about what the key performance indicators really are, and I think for good reason. I think there's a growing realization that maybe we've been measuring the wrong things. If there's not a real correlation to the end result we're aiming for, then it's just a number, right? Mm-hmm. So let's talk more about that. Where are people maybe measuring the wrong things? So you already posed one question. What are some other matrices that maybe need to be restructured or rethought?
I mean, I think the big one is, and this is certainly not new, but like activity versus results. And so there's just an over-reliance on like that top line activity and very little correlation to the results that we're getting. And more specifically, I think teaching reps how to make smart decisions with the tactics that they're applying. And I think specifically of like the 80-20 rule, right? So I think early on, especially making sure that our people know that the 20% activities that they're doing that are yielding 80% of the results. And so again, it's that over-reliance on top line activity and not enough incorporation of win rate. Specifically, should we fill up the pipeline, or maybe should we focus on increasing our win rate by 5 or 10 points? What would the impact on revenue be if that was maybe a core proxy instead?
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So are there? So the way that I was setting this up at the front of the show today, I think there's a belief. I have the belief that there certainly are some maybe personality traits that are better suited. Maybe some qualities that could even be you could actually grow in. People can definitely evolve and change that would
Mhm,
make them a better top performer
mhm.
versus maybe not getting the kind of results we're looking for. So let's maybe do a comparison contrast. And by the way, do you
Okay.
agree with my thesis? Maybe this is a bit of a debate here today. So what do you think about that? Could you plug anybody into a good system if you have the right approach, or does it really come down to a combination of the two?
Yeah, it's a great question. I tend to shy away from personality as defined by like extrovert versus introvert, or like this person could sell ice to an Eskimo, like that kind of outgoing. It's less about that. However, personally, like one of my favorite things to suss out during interview conversations or even during coaching conversations for selling school, it's is how it's is this person coachable, and
Hmm.
how much effort are they applying to learn?
Hmm.
And if I have somebody that's willing to put in the work to learn something new, to go through those 4 phases of learning the second so it's I like, the competency quadrant, right?
Yeah.
Unconscious incompetence, this is like ignorance is bliss, and it is a beautiful place to be. Second one is conscious incompetence, and it's
Hmm.
hard to be operated in conscious incompetence, but I think that this character trait of willingness to work hard on learning is is so crucial, especially because like buyers are always changing. Buying is always changing. There is always going
Hmm.
to be new things to learn, and we have to, work very hard to, limit our ego. And I know that gremlin. And with that, I'm going to pause. What do you think, Jonathan?
Well, I mean, I definitely think that some of the notions of personality and how those correlate to sales
Hi,
probably
Abigail.
are a little bit old school, right?
Yeah, yeah. Sorry, I was saying we have someone that said hello from Jamaica, so I said hi, Abigail.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, we'll get to that to the end. We'll save that to the end. We'll
Okay,
we'll have a whole
okay,
conversation here first, and we'll do our best to. If they're coming in, we can see
okay,
them live as they're coming in, which is exciting.
okay.
But we'll definitely get to everybody here after we've had a little bit of content first. So yeah, so extrovert versus introvert. Gosh, I've known some really great top performers who you definitely would not classify as an extrovert. They're much more the workman type of personality. He or she just takes it on. They want a very well mapped out a process to follow, and they get
Mhm.
great results by just bringing a great work ethic and a great attitude. So I think I'm on board with that. It's interesting because you brought up something about trainability or somebody who's willing to embrace the need to continue to grow, continue to train, continue to maintain a flexibility in their
Mhm.
personal development. I guess that's not necessarily a personality thing, is it? Maybe that's more of a personal choice. Maybe that's kind of, what is the attitude and aptitude of somebody for learning? Are there some ways you can measure that when you're building
I
a
think it's
team
a
and
kid
doing
a
on the recruiting
character
side?
trait. Yeah, yeah, absolutely, and I mean, hell, one of my favorite metrics while sales enabling is the learning indicator, right? And
Hmm.
so there's a certain I've got the whole, like, learning model or whatever, but this is maybe a little bit off topic, but there are certainly ways to suss out the effort that someone is applying, and I would consider it maybe a character trait and less of a personality trait.
Hmm.
But also like, and I want to touch back on something that you said though about process, right? Sales process. So I think part of focusing on win rate, right? When you start to get into win rate, right? When I is that we've done ourselves a great disservice by trying to pigeonhole a 100% of our buyers into a linear sales process that serves the company, right? The
Hmm.
value that the sales process delivers is internal. It gives them predictability around revenue, which is important, right? That is a critical thing to know. However, the reality is that's not how buyers buy. Right, I
Hmm.
can't was it a Gartner that had the buyer, like, it was a spaghetti map or something or whatever, it was all over the place, there's different
Hmm.
stages, like, so not only is, us trying to push them through our linear process self-serving, therefore salesy, and not as effective as it could be, it's also, it doesn't honor that each buyer, like, I hate to say it, is a special snowflake. We can talk to 20 different buyers in the same industry, in the same geography, in the same damn role, and they're each going to bring a different nuance to whatever business problem it is that they're trying to solve, and how they go about doing it and who they choose to do it with, especially given how many people are on the buying team these days. And so part of, I think, making this transition away from but not away from, but like almost redefining what is a top performer, what is the value of win rate in our like success metric, repertoire, and also what function does the sales process really serve today, and who says it can't be better? These are the types of questions that we need to be asking.
Well, so let's start to unpack some of that thing. So when it comes to process, what are some of the keys to getting a higher win rate? If we're going to take a look at that, it seems like you've got some core principles that could be applied. Let's talk about those.
So I'm pulling now directly from the Andy Paul's latest book, Sell Without Selling Out. And it's a game changer. And in that he differentiates between the concept of persuasion versus influence. Right. And most of us, like in sales floors, we're teaching our sellers how to persuade, which is an action that is universally despised by everyone. No one likes to be persuaded. No one likes to feel like they're being persuaded, and yet we persist. But anyway, this is a different thing than influence, and influence is obviously where the gold lives. Now, how does one pursue mastery around influence? Well, we teach it based on these 4 pillars. Again, and these are Andy's. The first pillar is connection, right? How well are we able to connect with the person, the human being that we're sitting across from? And they all build on each other. Number 2, curiosity. Number 3, understanding. Number 4, generosity. Now, good luck getting to a point where you're able to understand the most important thing to the buyer when you haven't mastered curiosity, right? Not just being curious and staying curious, leaving your agenda at the door, making no assumptions, challenging your own judgments, like, and your desired outcomes. Like you have to be able to let go of those things to truly uh, apply curiosity in the places that matter to the buyer. And very rarely are those places the same that are, matter to the traditional sales boss.
Yeah, very true. So if we were to take those pillars and just give a little bit on each of those, that could be really valuable to our audience, I think. So if we're trying to be top performers, or if we're engaging in a process of improving ourselves with our top performers, so let's start with connection. I mean, there's some approaches that probably will never change. If you can find common interests to discuss, that's one way to connect. But what are some ways that maybe aren't so great, and what do you recommend on improving your ability to connect?
So I think that one of the places that's not so great is the amount of preparation that we put into the connection. And specifically, like I challenge reps, like, what is the point of doing this research, right? Are you looking for just like a point of common ground so you can move forward in that direction, that the same thing that everybody's done? Or are you being a little bit more intentional with, um, how and where you're looking, again, specifically trying to suss out the most important thing to the buyer? Which is, if you're hearing me repeat this is a core component to what we teach. So that's a big part of it. And I'm not proposing that we spend like hours and hours doing research. Like I can blow through like the research in 10 minutes, but it's just, I think that's a big piece of it. A lot of times I see reps and the training, right? Whether it's the boss or the sales enablement team that's teaching this, we're teaching them to only research to look for some point of common ground that they can then take the conversation in. And I think it just feels stale, and there's a lot of room for improvement. Another concept I think that where people miss the mark on connection is this concept of shifting support, which I'll share in a moment. But I just want to frame this. I think connection is one of the hardest areas to teach these pillars, because if you were to ask 10 sellers, like, how good are you at connection? Guess what most of them are going to say? I'm pretty great. This is why I'm in this profession. I'm remembering, I think it was Salesforce did a study last year. It's like 89% of reps think that they are just exceptional at connection. Yet that same year, LinkedIn's, buyer report, or the state of buying, that like something nuts, like 92% of buyers report feeling like a number. And so
Well,
we could go deeper into that, but there's a ton of ways. Not shifting support, not focusing on asking, not telling things, engaging in a little bit of like rapport building, small talk. We teach people to move through MICE, which is a form of establishing trust, making your motives transparent. Are you doing what you're saying you're going to do? Integrity, whatever, credibility, right? Personal credibility and skill, like the product-based knowledge, whatever. Are you establishing credibility and whatever? So I'm going to pause there, but I could do this all day, friend. But those are some things we could do differently with connections, starting with recognize that there's room for improvement.
Yeah, and it sounds to me like there is what I'm hearing in between the lines is this: that you can either quickly look to connect with that person out of self-interest, or you can really take an interest in them. That's kind of what I'm hearing. Am I reading that in, or am I on point?
Now, that's kind of the point. The whole it who is it? Zig Ziglar said I can if you help other people get what they want out of life, then you'll get what you want out of life or something like that. I'm
Yeah, if
paraphrasing,
you help
but
enough other people get what they want, you can get whatever they want. You can have whatever you want. Yeah, something like that. I'm messing it up too. We did a great job together, but I think we know what we mean. Good old Zig. Some of his stuff definitely stands the test of time.
I agree. I
All right, so
agree.
connection. So we need to do a better
Mhm.
job of not out of pure self-interest, but actually figure out who are these humans we're dealing with. Right at the end of the day,
Mhm.
if you're doing business, you're helping humans,
Mhm.
hopefully. So who
Mhm.
are the humans I'm trying to sell to? So I can make a real connection. Kind of maybe even another way to put it would be from the heart, right? Kind of really take an
Mhm.
actual interest, and then the curiosity about unearthing the buyer's challenges, their frustrations, and goals. Let's talk about that. And maybe both in terms of the philosophy that should be behind that, but maybe you could give us some tactical help on that as well. How can we do a better job of asking the right questions in the right way? Help us out with curiosity.
Gosh, where do you start? It's funny when we were working on this book launch, somebody like the chapter on curiosity, somebody like wrote in one of the Amazon reviews that this chapter should be required reading.
Hmm.
Um, there's so many places. I think we teach about different types of questions: impact questions, insight questions, trade-off questions, follow-up questions. And I think I'm missing one group of them, but I think being more intentional with the types of questions that we're asking, and specifically having them be less about. Okay, let me say it this way, Jonathan. What is the purpose of asking a question during a sales call?
Well, I mean, the classic thing would be to uncover what are the needs. Maybe even to go deeper than that. What is the pain that the prospect is experiencing, with the hope that you are going to be able to solve that pain with your solution.
What is the pain? Gathering information. I
Yep.
I proposed a different reason, a different goal with asking questions. My goal with asking questions is to get the buyer to think differently.
Hmm.
I want them to think differently about their business problem, especially early on. And so this is a function of the question types, following up, going deep enough, going wide enough, um, slowing down, like listen, like actually listen to what's being said. Like don't like seek first to understand. Again, like trying to leave what you think that you know or where you need to take the conversation next and just like actually ask them great questions about their business. But my goal with asking questions is to, again, get that buyer to think differently. And, then we can kind of go from there. But something to consider when it comes to curiosity. Also, for the love of God, discovery is not a fate. It doesn't, we should not stop being curious just because some arbitrary phrase at the beginning of the sales process has wrapped. And now we're just going to, whatever, dump on people. And so you want to continue to be curious throughout the motion as well.
Right. There's overlap here. So if it feels too, if the edges on these component parts of your process are too sharp, too hard, it's going to feel, you feel that jolt, right? It's going to feel like
Mhm.
it's okay. Is this real? I thought this was a real authentic thing happening here, and all of a sudden it feels like it's kind of prescribed. That could be an issue. I can see what you mean. What are some of the additional keys you can give us on asking better questions? Can you give us some examples?
Yeah. How about let's start with this? Listen to your calls. Listen to
Hmm.
your calls. Listen to your calls. Listen to your calls. Um, Jonathan, I joke because it's like when reps kind of push back on like I understand why you don't want to do that. It stings, it hurts, like, but that
Yeah.
sting, like that's where the desire to grow lives. And so, but I always joke, you think this is hard, like to go back and listen to your calls. Try like listening to your podcast episodes right when you're getting started and like releasing them as even though you know them to be awful for the entire planet to like have forever. Like that's hard. Listen to your damn calls. And so that's the first thing.
Oh man, you're getting to me here. I mean, come on, you know.
No, but and I would also encourage others to like have other people listen to them as well. And then I'm gonna say, man, read. I would buy Andy's book. Like I know this is not about, but and read the chapter on curiosity and start to implement um, those teachings, starting with writing them all out, right? That was one of the homework assignments we put people through. I even put myself through it, because I was working on something where and I really I had to humble myself, like, whatever, but go through the process of writing out the question types and then practice using them, and then come
I love
talk to
it.
me. Come hit me up on LinkedIn, and I'll help you take it from there.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, well, the thing is, we should all, if we're leaders, we should definitely be able to get down in the trenches and lead
Mhm,
by example. Even we can't do it all the
mhm.
time, but we definitely should be able to do that at any time. I love that. So, moving on to curiosity, you had those four pillars: connection, curiosity, understanding, and generosity. So, understanding, committing to deeply understanding your buyer. What's that even mean? I mean, we've done a lot of work already at this point in the process. So, what else is there we need to know?
Well, so I understand it. Okay, so it's like this is another question. What is the purpose of a sales call? What's the goal of the sales call? What would you say, Jonathan?
Well, ideally, you're going to find if you've done your work up to that point, if you're talking about a closing call, because it depends which call, how many calls you have in your process. But
Let's start
if
with
you're
the
asking me
first.
what,
Let's start
I'm
with the
sorry.
first. Let's start with the first.
So
You're
the
the
initial call
AE.
is
Yeah.
I'm trying to just decide who are the stakeholders, so that I know what the decision making process on their end may look, what that is going to look like most likely. Get to know
Mhm,
them a little bit, hopefully make that
mhm,
connection. That's a
mhm,
build rapport is the terminology I've typically used for that,
mhm.
where there's trust and respect, and uncover what the needs really are. And if it's a good fit, then that should hopefully lead organically to something good. There may not be a good fit. Hopefully, we have the integrity to be ready to part ways amicably if that's true, and not try to push
Mhm,
a sale. But I guess that's its
mhm.
own conversation, isn't it?
It is. Yeah, that is I feel like that's a completely different conversation. Okay, so for me, it's to uncover the most important thing to the buyer. That is it. You're looking to uncover the most important thing. There is always one thing. And the first person to get to the first person, like let's say it's a competitive deal. There's other, tech in the ring. The first rep to get to understanding wins. And, like,
Hmm.
you think about, like, you like this we're talking about understanding in a very arbitrary manner. Let's flip it around. What does it feel like to be understood?
Hmm. Hmm.
How often does that feeling come our way? Even in personal lives too.
It's true. It's pretty rare that someone asks how you
And
doing, and
so
they really mean that, right?
well, that's on connection, right, yeah, like, that's on connection, but understanding is a couple layers. That's like
Sure,
the 301 level. But now
I'm
think
with you.
about it from a different like, I always laugh at this concept of differentiation because it's like, it doesn't take it's not very hard to differentiate when I'm giving the buyer the experience of feeling
Hmm.
seen, validated, and understood. And so my purpose, my goal with the sales call is to uncover the most important thing to them
Hmm.
and then help them get it. And it is
I
a
really like that.
very, very, very rare thing.
I like that. I like how concise that is to uncover what is the most important thing to the buyer. And again, it's buyer focused, uh, which that's probably the key element here and that's where everything is going, right? Instead of lead generation,
Mhm.
we're talking about demand generation, reversing the polarity of our focus and even our marketing efforts. And that applies here to our sales effort. Really committing
Isn't it
to
funny the way you
understand.
have to reverse it? Like I think there are a lot of people that have been selling that way this whole time. We've been winning deal. Like
Hmm.
my win rate for the last 3, 4 years of selling, I was in the 75%.
Hmm.
It's just a completely and like, don't get me wrong, we're teaching this to students right now. I am floored at how quickly these improvements in win rates are coming. I've been taught that win rate is a lagging indicator. You like do not use it for learning object or learning initiatives because it's too long. There are too many factors. But I've got people now reporting like a 10 point increase in their win rate in like a matter of 3, 4 weeks. It's
Hmm.
insane how
Wow.
quickly the results come
Hmm.
when the reps pivot to this framework. Insane.
Hmm.
But again,
That's
it's
really cool.
that understand it's going through the pillars. It is truly approaching these conversations very differently. And then we haven't even gotten to generosity. I feel like that's just a crazy word that doesn't even come up in sales at all. But yeah, it's been a blast, Jonathan. And you know what they say about I think it's called the learning pyramid. The base of the learning pyramid is
Hmm.
teaching others, which means 90% of what you teach to others as the teacher gets retained. And so I it has been incredible to be so close to this content, to be teaching this content, to be watching and celebrating with reps when they are having these massive wins and breakthroughs. And also, I don't think I've ever enjoyed a Thanksgiving more with my family because I've, been able to take all these principles about how to bring more humanity into how I'm selling. Like it's
Hmm.
actually making me a better human being too.
Well, let's hear some examples of that. So let's end on our content today with a note or two on generosity. What's that even mean in the context of making a sale? I mean, hopefully you're already doing a good service by selling a really great product or service, but this sounds like that's not that. This is beyond that. So talk to us about it.
Well, so a lot of my beliefs on generosity come from Adam Grant's Give and Take, right? This is my favorite author. I actually recommend this book to even SDRs getting started because I want you to understand like the concept, the whole thing, givers, matchers, takers. And this is like there's a lot of cool science there on reciprocity too. So if anybody's interested, I mean, it's just like read his stuff. You cannot go wrong. There's gold in them hills too. Okay, now that said, I think that generosity gets a bad rap in sales.
Hmm.
And it's interesting because it's almost like there's a couple of versions of this. It's like, people that give too much are suckers. You don't have time to give. Um, so there's a good giving and there's a bad giving in that. Like some people just give just to give and then completely deplete themselves and whatever. That said, if a person is to use generosity effectively, not
Hmm.
only in the one deal, but across your pipeline, you have to have uncovered the most important thing.
Hmm.
This is why the pillars build on top of one another. But once you do understand the most important thing, then you can start to get very creative with how to apply your generosity. And so, one of the things we're teaching reps specifically is, developing a generosity plan. And in a million years, if you had asked me like last year, what do you think, what are the chances that you're teaching about how to create a generosity plan while selling? I think I would have laughed in your face. But anyway, I'm just really grateful for the book and for the opportunity. But anyway, that's what I'll say about generosity.
Okay, well, very cool. So a top performer is somebody who's really great at connection and building curiosity and understanding and exercises generosity in the deal. Love that content, Amy. If folks want to go into the next level with today's conversation, what's the very best way they can do that?
Come find me on LinkedIn. That is absolutely the best way. We've got our second selling school cohort is starting in February 7th. So working on updating the landing page with all of our new wins and success stories and feedback from reps. And yeah, that's happening in February. Also my show too, right? Real Hotline. I'm ecstatic to engage with listeners over there as well.
Okay, so
Thanks
folks
for
can
asking,
connect with you
Jonathan.
there, and you've got various types of trainings and offerings for people to up their game, sounds like.
That's correct. We've
All
got
right,
the
love it.
selling school for reps and for managers too.
Well, love it. Well, we're talking about having top performers, and it should be no surprise that we are powered by the wonderful platform for getting pre-vetted talent known as overpass.com. It's free to go create your account if you're a hiring manager. You can quickly take a look and see who are some of these great people all around the world. What are their skills? What's their background? You can click and hear a voice sample, create a list, get them interviewed, get them hired in days. Normally it takes weeks, and you'll be surprised at the low cost. You can absolutely impress your investors if you're trying to get to that next level of growth for your SaaS or B2B services company. Check them out at overpass.com. All right, well, it is time. I see some folks are chomping at the bit to get into the
I'm
Q&A
excited.
section today. So without further ado, let's take a look here. I'm going to pull some of these out, and we'll discuss them here, Amy.
Okay.
We've got some really
Okay.
nice input from several people. So here's one from Jared. It's a great question. I mean, what role does personal motivation in a company play in being the kind of top performer you're talking about? Motivation's a big topic. It has been for decades now, at least, maybe forever. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't I think that motivation it's tricky, right? Because the challenge presents it's okay to be motivated to close a deal. It's okay to be motivated to generate revenue. It's okay to be motivated by getting to President's Club, like fill in the blanks. I was there as well. I think the challenge with motivation is when we put our own motivation above that of the buyer.
Hmm.
And so and I also think that reps get into trouble when they don't disclose what their motivation is, right? So I think bringing way more transparency into motivation goes a really, really long way. And I will end with I don't know which habit it is, but I'm reminded of the what is it, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. One of the key pieces of motivation for me has always been win-win or no deal. So I'm not motivated to pursue anything that doesn't benefit both of us.
Yeah, I love that win-win uh, uh, methodology and approach.
Mhm.
Whenever you mention that, I can hear Linda Wertheimer's voice on NPR radio talking about the 7 Habits going back that's forever
The
ago.
classic. It's
But
like a must read. Yeah, it's a great
right,
one.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
I've got another one here from Ryan Becker I'd like to quickly share. He's wondering about the role that it's kind of an intangible thing, right? But what role does a top performer have in terms of overall team performance? Is there a place for individual leadership? Can that be fostered? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, okay, this is a great question, Ryan. I love this one. Okay. So I was just coaching somebody in the class last week, and they're new to the company, but their company's win rate is 11%. And at week 4 of selling school, his win rate is now 14%. He started at 0, right? Because he was just coming off ramp. So
Hmm.
already 3 clicks above the company average. And he was so very fascinated about the win rate of the entire team, right? He had been having these questions internally, and he had all of these numbers. And one of the top guys on the team, like there was some like discrepancy, and I had to reel him back in, and I was like, friend,
Hmm.
I need you to focus on yourself right now. I need you to focus on your win rate right now.
Hmm.
I need you to focus on making your win rate better and stronger with each deal. And I, in fact, don't want you to mention win rate at all to your company
Hmm.
until somebody asks you about it, right? How is it that you're pulling so far ahead? Now, I do think that there is a tremendous responsibility for AEs that are working with SDRs, right? To really take advantage of that coaching, not take advantage, but I'll even say I'm morally obligated. It benefits everyone. It's a win-win to make sure that your SDRs are coached on um, maybe why you're not accepting deals or calls that they're sending through and how to do it differently. Also,
Hmm.
giving them a taste of what it's like to be an AE. Right. And so I think that there's a big responsibility there. Okay, I'm asking these questions for this reason, and here's where we're going with this. And so
Hmm.
that is very much a thing. Final one, I also do know that peers learn or sellers learn best from their peers. It's always
Hmm.
been that way. It will continue to be this way. And when you think about, again, that learning pyramid, like the base of it, so it's retention. It goes through all the different tactics that you can do then and how much you retain of what you learn based on doing that tactic. When you get to, if you're in a situation where you're maybe a rep that did something great and give them, I don't know, 10-minute spot for the weekly team meeting, and they teach the team what they've done,
Yeah.
right? They're going to retain a lot. And so I think that there's an opportunity to gamify that as well. Hope that
I
answered
love
the
that.
question.
Putting your people in a position where they have to teach it. Not only is the team benefiting by learning from a peer where their receptivity is probably higher, but now that
Mhm,
rep's locking it in. I love that.
mhm, mhm.
Here's a very tactical question from Jay Bentley. What do you do when the prospect says, I don't have cycles to do this? So I assume this is about, factors that may not be under their immediate control, or what have you. There's some
Bentley, what
tips and
does
tricks in that?
cycles mean? I'm not sure what we mean by the word cycles here.
Well, in other words, this isn't like their time frame doesn't match up to yours for making the deal. So all this work you've done to build the connection, curiosity. What I'm hearing, and Jay Bentley, you can correct me. What I'm hearing is that there's like, here's the momentum, and it's the moment, and it's just not ready. So it could kind of go stale. Do you have some tips and tricks about that of hanging on to these, longer time frame deals in your pipeline? Maybe that's what he's getting at. I'll let him answer here in the chat, but I think that's probably what it is.
Okay. So Jay Bentley,
Time, Jay Bentley said, yeah.
are you still gonna have a quota in 6 months? How about 12 months from now? Yeah,
Yeah.
right. We're still going to have quotas. And so for me personally, I never, like, I was constantly asking about not just what their timeline is, but what are the priorities on your table right now? I recognize, as I know that most of us do, that everyone's got their own priorities. And just because they're talking about something, maybe they're in like explore phase and like they're not ready to start a buying motion. Maybe they've got like three other pressing things that they need to do first. One, I was going to find that early on and I was going to honor it. I knew that they were coming to me for a particular reason. And so I was focused on making sure that I was giving them value, right, at each stage, at every single interaction. And value, by the way, is not defined by me. Value, that is, would be completely pointless. Value is defined by them. But generally speaking, right, value equals progress. And so um, if when I uncovered that they weren't ready to buy in this cycle, that was totally okay with me. I still helped them where they were, gave them such an experience, back to that understanding that I know they're going to come back to me when they're ready. Now, the challenge is, I obviously, with some sales bosses on this one, right, we can tend to feel a lot of pressure there to close at certain times. And I sold for a decade. Like, I totally feel you. However, it gets easier the more, like, once you start to have enough of these conversations where people are coming back to you more regularly, right? So you feel less of a pinch there. So one
Yeah.
of the things that I coach people on at the beginning is get more opportunities in the pipeline now, so you don't feel so pressured to shove these people through based on your timeline, not theirs.
That makes a lot of sense. Then also stays, you're remaining integrous to this whole principle of finding out what's most important to them. Hey, what's most important to them may not be to close that deal right now. So I definitely think there's some good tips and tricks there. Had one of the audience members ask for a repeat of those book titles that you mentioned earlier. So I do. So the one is Sell Without Selling Out, right?
Yeah. So this is I got it right here. I'll lift it up. Sell Without Selling Out. It went number one, like something 130 Amazon reviews in the first 3 weeks. It was massive. Give and Take by Adam Grant. 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. I think those were the only 3 we talked about so far. By Stephen Covey.
Yeah. That's a given, man. That's a classic right there. So, and the author of the Sell Without Selling Out is Andy Paul, correct?
Andy Paul.
All right, I'm going to put that here in the on the screen for all of you good people. So, whoops, that's not the right one. Here we go. To read. Operator error. Uh-oh. There we go. A couple of titles. Take those down. So, Sell Without Selling Out by Andy Paul. Give and Take by Adam Grant. I think everyone knows the 7 Habits by Stephen Covey. Hit me up on LinkedIn if you forget it. But good stuff. Let me get back to some of these other questions. Got one or two more here that we'll hit while we're together. Let's see here.
I'm noticing, like, when it starts to get dark here, my camera, like, it doesn't on this like tester computer. I may have to turn the light on so I don't look like a blurry douchebag. Are we allowed to say that?
You could never look like what you just said. I think that we're
Oh.
safe. You're safe on that one. That's not on the list. So good stuff. I mean, are there other notes that you might say? I've noticed more than one person asking that they were hoping for a little bit more on generosity. Like Kenny Thompson said, she was said that he was really curious about your take on generosity, and you mentioned that was really a big change for you as well. Give us a little bit more on that, would you please? Like, what does that actually mean? Like, if I'm the guy, that's my deal. What am I doing that actually encompasses this concept of generosity that you're talking about?
Okay, so this is a good question. So I again, I'm going to restate: generosity is a moot point unless we are uncovering the most important thing to the buyer. One of the ways, like a lot of times with sellers, right, when we think of ROI or a business case, right, we're gonna be generous and help the buyer make the business case about the whatever. That's not, so ROI is not an A versus B decision, right? It's which is how it tends to be framed. Should I buy this product or not? Should I renew this product or not? Like, whatever. That's not accurate, right? ROI is an A versus B, C, or D decision. and D generally equals do nothing. And so when you think about ROI, when you think about making a business case, there's a way that sellers think about it and sales managers think about it, and then there's the actual business case that the buyers need to make. And so one of the reps in the program right now is working on helping their buyer to make this business case about the monthly spend on all their software for this particular industry. It's something that's in the scope of what the business does, but they had never dreamed of approaching the air quotes business case of the ROI from that perspective. I personally liked to help buyers. I sold information, right? And so information is one of those intangible things that's hard to see. And so I would help people map out how information was moving in the current state based on the decisions and how good those decisions were, so that we can essentially baseline the current state so that they could really, make that business case afterwards. I think that there's a couple of, like, I could go deeper on like the 6 steps to like creating a generosity plan, but I feel like it's a little bit out of scope. But those are just two big examples. But again, with the knowledge that value equals progress, I'm trying to be generous with my ability to help them make progress again, wherever that is and wherever they're at, including like letting go of my agenda. So I hope that made sense.
All right. Well, lots of great content today, Amy. Once again, I want to put it out there. If you want to follow up with Amy online, here is her information, everybody. Check her out on her LinkedIn profile. She's got a lot of great things going on in terms of training offerings, their assessments. There's a whole program that you can get enrolled to, and your starting point is to find her on LinkedIn. And I want to thank you once again for being on the show with us today, Amy.
It's my pleasure, Jonathan. Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
Yes, it was indeed. And thanks also to our whole audience for being with us as you come every single week. The show has been such a success because of you. So please keep on coming back. Bring a friend. We'll be back same time, same station next week. And for the whole team here at Evolve Sales, this is Jonathan Fisher signing off. Take care, everybody.